Good afternoon. Today is March 9th, 2022, and welcome to the bill hearings for the Ways and Means Committee. First, calling House Bill 1129, a local Garrett County delegation bill, and we have Delegate Byzo presenting. Welcome, Delegate Byzo.
Thank you, Madam Chair Atterbury and Vice Chair Washington and members of the committee. For the record, I am Delegate Byzo and I'm here to present House Bill 1129. As you're probably aware, out in my neck of the woods, we deal with quite a bit of heavy snowfall. This often leads to school closure and delays. The bill is simple. It will permit the superintendents in Garrett and Allegheny counties to order virtual education days on what would otherwise be a snow day. This will help the school system stay on schedule and make sure students aren't falling too far behind. It will reduce the disruption in education caused by our severe weather here in Western Maryland. These days still count against the county's allotted number of inclement weather closures, so they cannot make these orders indiscriminately and without just cause and use virtual days instead of the snow days. This bill also requires the school systems to make accommodations for students without internet access, and they will make an effort to provide them with multiple services and meals in those days where they order these snow days or virtual days. The bill is postured to make this a pilot program in Garrett and Allegheny counties. After they see how things go for the next few years, and in 24, they will issue a report to the General Assembly, at which time this program can be extended, discontinued, or expanded to other areas. You will find letters of support from the boards of education for both Garrett and Allegheny counties. This is supported by the Garrett County Commissioners, the Garrett County delegation, and the Allegheny County delegation. They requested this bill and are confident that they have the capacity to deliver top-notch education on these virtual days. Thank you for your time and consideration. I urge a favorable report on this bill.
Thank you. And questions, Delegate Ebersol. You're muted.
I'm sorry that I didn't have a chance to look at the testimony. Did the Maryland State Education Association weigh in on this bill?
I don't have any indication here in front of me, but I'm not going to say that they are because I'm not sure, but I'm sure if the Garrett County boards are requesting this, that they probably received approval for this before they made this request.
I didn't mean the State Department. I meant the collective bargaining agent for the teachers.
Oh, okay, I got you. Yeah, I think they're in support of this because we had discussions on this at the school board meetings prior to the session, and when they asked us to support this legislation.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Delegate Byzo, for bringing this bill. I have a question. I really don't know the answer, so I'm hoping you can answer it. Is this something that needs to be done statutorily? For your county to actually use virtual days for snow days, or is it that it must be done statutorily in order for you to count towards your 180 days? So I'm just trying to see, it doesn't seem like something that we would initially have to pass a law for, and maybe there's something I'm not getting.
Yeah, I think, the county is allocated so many snow days. And we were informed, in that in order for them to be able to do this, to replace snow days, that they needed to have the authority of the General Assembly, because Garrett County can't, they're a county commissioner form of government, and they can't change the laws in Garrett County unless we legislators submit a bill to allow them to do it.
Okay, thank you. Actually, that last part of it clears it up for me a little bit. So thank you for making that clear. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Byzo.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1129. Now calling House Bill 1163, the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Delegate Alonzo Washington here to present on House Bill 1163. This is a comprehensive piece of legislation that aims to remedy the learning loss suffered by our students as a result of COVID-19, as well as equip our state for high quality virtual education when circumstances require implementation. It is clear that our state and local education systems were not fully prepared for the sudden transition to remote learning as a consequence of the pandemic. This bill provides robust infrastructure to ensure our school systems are prepared and adequately equipped when students are required to learn remotely. This ongoing preparation is key to ensuring that students don't lose valuable learning time. I'll conclude by saying, Madam Chair, that this is a bill that passed out of this committee last year and also passed out of the House last year. The Education Subcommittee took about 3, 4, 5 weeks to work on this bill to perfect it to this. And so I'm really grateful for our Education Subcommittee for working on this piece of legislation. And for those reasons, Madam Chair, I ask for a favorable report on this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the Vice Chair? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1163. Moving on to House Bill 938, Delegate Kittleman, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to present House Bill 938, School Accountability, Parent Empowerment and Choice. This is one of a number of ways that parents can be given a choice in how their children are educated. The bill offers if 50% of the parents of a school that has failed to meet the state educational standards for at least a year, 50% of the parents can petition the local school board for an intervention. Intervention means first they could do a converting a school, which is as it sounds, they change the school into something usually for a private operator, like a charter school or management systems with a rigorous review process. The second is to close the school, which is as it sounds, but then they must be able to put the students into schools that are not too far away, but that are better at meeting the standards. There is an amendment to this bill. I hope you all have a copy. It adds what was originally, didn't get into it, a third alternative, which is the educational choice model. And that is when a county board offers students one of 3 opportunities: a scholarship from the Boost program, if it is appropriate, funds, if we have an education savings account, or any kind of grant or fund intended to provide and subsidize educational choice. I have been a strong proponent of school choice for as long as I've been involved in politics, which is longer than I care to admit. The reason that I am, it's interesting, I am a libertarian Republican, and I was always on the same side of all of my liberal Democrat friends on this issue because of the equities involved. For example, in the pandemic, I think that became so clear. We had 3,000 parents, families in Howard County that took their children out of the virtual school learning environment and put them either in private schools or homeschooled or any of the other opportunities that they had. That was great, but what about parents who were not having the same level of income, parents of a lower income? They had no choice. They did virtual schooling or none. And then look at the parents, and I always look at Baltimore City because I've become so involved in what's going on there. Not only did they often not have access to an internet, but the low-income parents had no alternative. So while some of our children suffered trying to learn virtually, there were a great many children who had no opportunity at all. And I just think the inequities of not allowing, the fact that parents who have the income do have a choice, and it's fine, they can take it. But what about the parents who don't have a choice? And what about those children. And let me just tell you what has made me so passionate about this issue. I have been, and Baltimore City is not alone, but it's just an example of what can happen. I know we have Kerwin, I wanted to mention that. But as Ike Leggett, who's head of the accountability board, said to the appropriations committee, don't expect anything soon. It's going to take a long time. That's fine. I have hope, very high hopes, that the Kerwin programs will fix things. But fixing any kind of a school system is difficult. It takes time. What do we do about the kids now? The kids who are in schools, they're failing them and failing the community. We've wasted decades, 40, 50 years of children who have not had a school where they can learn. You've seen the recent examples. I guess the worst one was the young man who graduated from a Baltimore City school with a 0.13 GPA, and he was in the top third of his class. That may be an outlier, but there are many, many stories that are similar. And I just wanted to give you a sample of, I have so much research. I can go back to the 1980s and give you examples, but the DLS audits department has audited schools every 6 years. It has audited Baltimore City in 2018, 2012, and 2006. And I could pick any of them, but I picked 2012 because we know more about what's going on now. And I just wanted to give you an idea of the length of time and the kind of things that are so concerning to me and to many others. This has been there was an editorial in the Baltimore Sun called "A Devastating Indictment." And this is what it pulled out of the audit and said: Maryland has for decades funded education in the city at a higher level than other jurisdictions. That is why a preliminary audit report detailing evidence of waste, fraud, and abuse in the system represents a potentially devastating indictment of the city's school reform effort. One thing I needed to say in advance, very clearly, none of this is the fault of the students or the teachers. It is the educational bureaucracy and, to a great extent, the unions. Let me continue. The system paid millions of dollars in questionable overtime, sick leave, and vacation pay to teachers and administrators who may not have been entitled to it, for example, and failed to collect millions more in unpaid bills that were never referred to a collection agency. The report also documents dozens of potential conflicts of interest in which part-time central office workers were allowed to double dip as independent vendors, providing essentially the same services. How do you lose 1,400 computers or pay a bus company to ferry students on a day that the schools are closed without raising a red flag somewhere in the system? The report depicts a system so riddled with failures of accountability and oversight as to suggest that nobody in the central office knew what was happening or took responsibility for keeping track of how much was being spent, for what purpose, or where the money was going. The state audit report is particularly damaging because it comes in the wake of a series of recent revelations of financial mismanagement, including a $65 million payout as part of a liberal accrued leave policy, $500,000 in credit card charges by top administrators for pricey meals and luxury hotel accommodations, and a $250,000 makeover of the school system information technology director's office at a time when officials were lobbying lawmakers for millions to repair dilapidated school buildings. That is a system that will take a Kerwin to repair. But I hope that you all will consider offering these kids a chance to get into a school where they can learn and to have some choice. And thank you.
Questions for Delegate Kittleman? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 938. Now Delegate Kittleman calling House Bill 1145, whenever you're ready.
I almost forgot my apologies. This bill, they're several of us have a bill in to change the way the school system determines the enrollment in each school. Right now, it's done on one day in September, and each school reports their enrollment, and that is how they're allocated their funding for the year or for the following year. This is not a particularly good system, although apparently more than half of the school systems across the country use some sort of average to determine enrollment, but there are a number of states that do use the one-day system. Particularly when it's in the beginning of the year, you normally get either a very high enrollment, and with students that don't always end up staying in the school system, ghost students, and it is a much safer and a more accurate way to determine enrollment if you take an average. This bill also has an amendment. It just changes. Originally it was September to December, and decided to change it to January to the last day of school, because it would be closer to the time when the next season would start. I think that would be not only a good change for accuracy, but it would also be an incentive for schools to encourage their students to be at school and to learn. So thank you, and I hope you give it a favorable report.
Are there any questions for Delegate Kittleman? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Kittleman. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1045. Now calling House Bill 1124, and we have Betsy Hamilton with us again. Hello. And there is one person after you, but whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for the introduction. I'm here to introduce House Bill 1124 on behalf of Delegate Adams. This bill requires that by November 1 and March 1 of each year, beginning in calendar 2022 through 2032, that each local school system report to the AIB on all expenditures in the local school system's annual budget. On request, AIB must provide a local government with a copy of that report. AIB can receive reports from local school systems and provide copies to local governments upon request using existing resources. Also, the local school systems, which already budget according to specified categories, have their budgets approved by a county governing body, keep track of expenditures, and undergo various audits each year. They can handle reporting requirements under the bill using their existing resources. Thank you for allowing me to present on behalf of Delegate Adams, and we'd ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Next, Brianna January for 2 minutes, please. I don't think she is in.
She's just coming in.
Okay, thank you. We need some music.
She's in, Madam Chair.
Okay, Brianna January, please, for 2 minutes.
So sorry for my delay. I was watching YouTube and it has a delay, obviously. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, esteemed committee. Thank you for having me before the committee once again. For the record, Brianna January with the Maryland Association of Counties, this time in support of HB 1124. As always, you have my testimony, so I'll be brief. Counties applaud the bill and the bill sponsor for encouraging greater transparency in local education funding and spending. Counties feel that this bill and its reporting requirements are extremely timely as the state embarks on implementing the landmark reforms of the blueprint for Maryland's future and its accompanying escalation of local funding. And this bill is also timely, committee, as the state continues to receive an influx of federal pandemic recovery funds to support public education. Additionally, counties support the bill's designation that the AIB be the recipient and guardian of the bill's required reporting. And on that, MACO supports HB 1124 and urges a favorable report. Thank you.
Are there Questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1124. Now House Bill 1122, Delegate Grice, and there are 4 people after you who will have 2 minutes. Whenever you're ready, Delegate Grice.
Ready now. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Delegate Jeff Grice presenting House Bill 1122. This has to do with homeschoolers. And as you all are very much aware, homeschoolers generally have the same curriculum as the students who go to public schools. There are some differences. However, the local school systems do follow their progress throughout their schooling career. But one aspect that these homeschoolers don't have is they don't have access to the extracurricular activities. And obviously those are very important. And some of those extracurricular activities that are included in this bill includes interscholastic sports, music, drama programs, student organizations, and other programs. And as you all know, if anybody who's participated in any of these programs, the benefits of these is it does improve the mood for a lot of these students, and especially for these high schoolers and middle schoolers, that's very, very important. It's a tough time, certainly in their lives with a lot of changes. It improves their concentration, reduces stress. It helps with their self-confidence, especially if they're in leadership roles. And some of the, I guess, the arguments for moving in this direction is the parents are still taxpayers. And as you all are very much aware, especially after we just passed Kerwin, that education, as it should be, is a very high percentage of our budget. And so we want to make sure that we're not leaving any students out. And this also, what it does too, is it bridges the gap between the kids who are being homeschooled and their friends who are involved in our public school system too. So the bottom line is, I mean, our children, they deserve a chance to challenge themselves beyond their academics, and they shouldn't be held back because of the rules that we have in place now. So we're just asking the committee to change the rules so that we can include all of our students. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Brandy Frampton for 2 minutes, please.
Hi there. Can you hear me? Oops,
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, there I am. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Brandy Frampton, and I'm speaking in support of House Bill 1122 that will allow homeschool students to participate in public school extracurricular activities. I am a resident of Talbot County, where I currently homeschool my 2 children who are in 4th and 6th grades. Most sports opportunities end after 8th grade if a child is not enrolled in school. In rural areas like the Eastern Shore, it is even harder to find these types of opportunities after 8th grade. My 12-year-old son has been diagnosed with a laundry list of learning disorders. Being challenged in that way took a real hit to his self-esteem. Sports is the one area where he naturally shines, and it has helped him feel better about himself and ultimately improve his performance academically. Both of my children will be devastated if they no longer can play team sports during their high school years. Sports are equally important to many of their homeschool friends. Allowing homeschoolers to share their talents with their communities is something that benefits our children, public school stakeholders, and the community at large. My husband and I pay taxes that support these extracurricular activities, and therefore it is unfair that our children do not have access to them. The majority of states in our country allow homeschoolers to play on public school sports teams. So why is Maryland so far behind? Please help open up access for homeschoolers to public school extracurricular activities. It is long overdue and much needed. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, Jody Dawson, please, for 2 minutes. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Jody Dawson. I'm the mother of 4. We live in Queen Anne's County. My oldest daughter is a sophomore at Kent Island High School. We are newer to public school here in the area. Last night, my daughter Lily was awarded the top offensive player and MVP for her basketball team. She led the Bayside Conference this past year. And basically, we are asking We are in support of this bill because public school curriculum is not really a good fit for our children, but we'd really like them to participate in extracurriculars and in sports. I have 4 really good athletes. I have a kid who would like to participate in the drama program at the high school, but we would like to have the option to make some changes to their curriculum. And honestly, for Lily's personality, I think her schooling at home would just be a better environment for her. But I don't want to pull her out of all the extracurriculars where she is a huge contributor to the varsity volleyball and basketball teams. So we are asking that you please consider giving us as parents and taxpayers the right to really pour our best into the county to school our kids as we see fit, but to also let them have access to local programs that are so beneficial to them. And I think if we've seen anything as moms over the last couple of years with COVID, I think a lot of us are just fearful that should something like this, God forbid, ever happen again, we want to kind of be ready to make some good decisions for our kids and be able to possibly, adapt our curriculum to do whatever is best, as the previous woman who gave testimony said, but still give our kids access and the availability to really participate in their local schools. And so as a woman who is married to a builder in Queen Anne's County, we are paying a lot of money every year in impact fees. That money is going towards public schools, and we would like to have access to public school programs. Thank you.
Is Jennifer Lambert here?
Yes.
Okay, 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, committee, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I am a homeschool mom of 5 children. Not only is their education a top priority, but so is their athletics. Therefore, I am very excited about this bill. My children, along with many other homeschooled kids, are very talented athletes. And right now, their rec and club level teams are serving them well, but come high school, this may end. I'd like to offer you 4 reasons to allow homeschoolers to participate in public school extracurriculars. Number 1, not every sport or activity is offered outside of school, especially at the high school level. If they are, the level of competition is often subpar. The homeschool community is growing for many reasons, and families should not have to compromise those reasons just so their kids can continue activities. 3, as taxpayers, our kids should be offered the opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities as they are extra, no matter how a child is educated. And finally, activities are not a partisan issue, but rather a fundamental need of a child's overall well-being. As a mom, I worry about missed opportunities that could so easily be rectified. We have seen 36 states pass similar bills, including neighboring Virginia just last month. It's time for Maryland to join. Our homeschooled children are simply hoping for the chance and resources to develop and contribute their skills. Education is only a piece of a child's youth experience, so I urge you to find this bill favorable. I also ask that you read my written testimony as it offers greater detail. Please contact me for any questions or thoughtful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 1 signed up unfavorable to testify. Debbie Jason, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury, Vice Chair Washington, and the Ways and Means Committee for allowing me to speak today in opposition to House Bill 1122. While there are homeschoolers who would like access to public school sports and other public school extracurricular activities, educators have overwhelmingly stated that they don't want additional requirements in order to do so. B3 of the bill includes meets and complies with the public schools requirements for participating in the extracurricular activity. According to state requirements, homeschoolers would then have to make sure that out-of-state travel beyond 300 miles doesn't involve any loss of school time. According to Anne Arundel Public School requirements, students in grades 9 through 12 must maintain a C average. And they say that if a student with disabilities who's receiving special ed services doesn't meet academic eligibility standards to participate, the student and/or their parent or guardian may contact the principal of the school and request that the IEP team meet. Home educators are not currently required to track attendance or determine grades or GPAs. Homeschool children also don't receive IEPs. Considering the extremely large number of people who homeschool due to their children's neurodiversity and also due to disabilities, including learning disabilities, this would result in discrimination against many, if not all, of those children. There's the risk that these public school requirements would soon also be required of homeschoolers who don't want to be involved in public school extracurricular activities. To do otherwise would be considerably hard on those who review homeschoolers for COMAR compliance. With over 40,000 home educated children in the state, I can't see how the state homeschool office could do things any other way. For these reasons and more, I strongly urge you to give House Bill 1122 an unfavorable report. You also have my written testimony, and I'm willing to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Delegate Guyton.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here to express your views on this. Honestly, we had a lot of homeschoolers last week that were here asking us not to get involved in any way in the way that they school their children. And while everyone who is involved in the homeschooling community has been really, really polite, there have been a lot of abuses and bullying behind the scenes to different legislators, to the one who sponsored that bill and myself, honestly, some of which have been reported to the state police. So I think it's very hard right now to hear the homeschool community asking for involvement and to be a part of the public school system, when on the other side, there are people on my hall actually getting threats if we get involved in any way in the homeschool community. I need to know, we need to figure out what the homeschool community is and whether everyone can get on the same page with this sort of thing, because right now it puts us in a very, very difficult position. And I hope that you understand that. And I'm not accusing anyone here of being inappropriate, but there are certainly members of that community who are being inappropriate. So I just feel like I have to let you all know that. I'm tentative to even step into that realm right now. So thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Delegate Grice, for bringing this bill. And I appreciate those that came to testify. You know, I do feel that it's two different issues concerning the bill last week and this bill here before us today. I do very much appreciate that the homeschool community would like to keep, you know, their autonomy, but would you not say, Delegate Grice, you know, that the sports issue and allowing extracurricular activities is a little bit different than when we're talking about curriculum and an advisory board, which is kind of a different, a totally different animal. What would you say? What would you say to that question?
Oh, I would agree with that, but I also never ever condone anyone who's not civil, or I would never condone anyone making any threats against anyone for any reason whatsoever. You know, you and I and you know, our colleagues in the General Assembly, our job is to agree to disagree and to make public policy. I want to say that first and foremost.
Yes.
That being said, you know, I hope that the conduct of a few people certainly. That's not the reason why we wouldn't consider this bill. To be quite honest, that's a terrible reason not to consider this bill. This bill should stand on its own merits by itself, and that's where I agree with you, Delegate Rose. And that this is, I mean, these students are members of our community, whether a part of the public school system or not. And it's critically important that we get these kids out of their home. To socialize with their community, to play with their community, to be organized in their community. I mean, these are our future leaders, and this is a critical part of our these children's development. You know, if we're going to focus entirely on their academics, that's detrimental. That's going to hurt these kids. And I sure would hate to have a couple of bad apples who came out to testify last week that made threats. I'd hate to see those bad apples hurt things for the rest of us. It's sort of like back in school where you had a couple bad kids and the whole class was punished. You know, that's not how we should conduct ourselves as leaders. So I hope that the committee will give this bill, some serious consideration. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up, and I appreciate what Delegate Grice, what you had to say, and I too certainly do not condone anyone attacking any other member of this committee or any member of the General Assembly. And so I just do hope that, you know, as you mentioned, that some people who took things way to the extreme are not bearing on other issues dealing with the homeschool community. But thank you very much for your response. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, may I just say one more thing about the bill that we heard today?
Go ahead.
On my question. Oh, thank you very much. My understanding is that if the homeschool community got behind the work group and the conversation that Delegate Ruth was offering to you in her bill, which wasn't just about curriculum, but it was about hearing what the homeschool community wants for their kids, that this would be a very appropriate issue to bring to that group. So I'm not sure they're two different things after all, but perhaps I'm reading her legislation incorrectly. Thank you.
Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, this conversation has brought up some thoughts regarding the same community, although it is different bills. It's a similar community and it's the same community. And last week I got the message very, very loud and clear from this community, which is that there was not an interest in terms of being engaged. There was not an interest in terms of the state or our public schools or our public system engaging with this community. That was a very strong message that was sent to us last week. So although it's a different bill, it's just causing a little bit of confusion for me as we have this bill before us with the same community, the homeschool community, in terms of the engagement with the state and our public school system. So I just wanted to understand a little bit in terms of my question, sort of for the homeschool individual, maybe one of you could respond, the homeschool parents, to tell us a little bit more about how you prefer to be engaged in terms of us getting your feedback around various issues of the homeschool community, especially as it relates to this bill. How can we better determine that as it relates to this bill? Thank you.
I'm happy to respond if that's okay. My fear in testifying today was that Bill 832 is going to be brought up because these are two completely different issues. So I think the homeschool community in Maryland is pretty happy overall with the regulations. We're only required to have 2 reviews a year, and I think that's great and fair. And we've been very happy with the process here. Again, the only thing that we are unhappy with is that we don't have access to certain programs. And if a homeschool family chooses to sign up for an extracurricular with the public school system, that is a choice. So my family enrolling on a high school football team should have nothing to do with any other homeschooler in the state of Maryland. And I think that's where some opposition and some fear might be coming from because of Bill 832. It got everyone on high alert. So again, I mean, I would not support this bill if I thought it was going to harm the homeschool community. It's a choice. If I want to sign up for an extracurricular, I should have to go through whatever regulations are set by the state of Maryland, the Board of Ed, Talbot County, et cetera, for my family to participate in that program. And it should not affect or change any regulations in any way, shape, or form for any other homeschooler that is choosing not to participate in public school extracurriculars. And I would say that across the board. Every family I talked to after this bill was introduced was in favor of it. They said, yes, absolutely. We pay taxes. It makes sense. I want my kids to be able to play sports. I want them to be able to be in the marching band, whatever it was. So for me personally, that's how I feel about the state of affairs of homeschooling in Maryland. So thank you.
That's so helpful. Thank you.
I have a sort of a quick question myself. So because I too am a little confused, I'm not familiar with the homeschool community, but like my colleagues have mentioned, they made it very clear that they were a community and they made it very clear that they wanted to be left alone. And so it was, I think, possibly 35 witnesses who came to testify to give us that message. So where are those 35 people in support of this legislation feeling that strongly about this? So that's kind of one question. My other question, I'm going to say them all, get it all out at once. I mean, on one hand, there's discussion of homeschooling and that's a choice. But I think if you choose to homeschool your child and you choose to pick your own curriculum to teach your child, then aren't you also choosing to find extracurricular activities outside of the school because that's what you've chosen not to engage in the school. You've chosen not to have your child engaged in the school. And my final comment, which certainly anyone on the panel can respond to, is that, you know, I have 3 kids too, and 2 of them, my boys play sports. They play travel team. They're not of the age where they're not in high school, so they're not going to school playing sports. So we found these outside of the school, but those kids play together. And, you know, it takes them a while to gel. If it's a new team, they form a bond and they start playing well and they know each other and they know their moves and everything. And I think that's the same you can say for kids that go to school with each other. They know each other. They spend all of this time together in school. They're playing sports together. So I think that would be, you know, that bond wouldn't be there for someone who's coming in from outside of the school. I think kids would actually feel very resentful and hurtful if there was a kid who did not attend school there that came in and played a sport and took somebody else's spot that went to that school. I think that would cause a severe friction, quite frankly. So if anybody wants to comment on that, I'm happy to hear the response.
May I comment on why there aren't more people out today? Because I can answer that.
Yep.
So the HSLDA did not put out an action alert for this bill. They have it under monitor along with every other bill that involves homeschooling other than the one you all heard last week. It has also not been posted all over social media. So people on either side, for or against this bill, largely most of them don't even know that it exists. You know, whatever their opinion is about homeschoolers participating in extracurriculars, the vast majority don't even know that this bill exists because it's not out there like last week's bill was.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Yes.
I can address that. And I understand the wrath that your committee felt in that last bill hearing. And I can't apologize because I obviously had nothing to do with that.
Right.
I wasn't any part of that committee or that hearing at all. But our office did receive a lot of comments from probably a lot of the same people. And they thought that because there's a provision in this bill that basically says that these homeschool athletes, or when they participate in these extracurricular activities, they have to follow by the same rules, with the academic qualifications, all the same rules that a child who goes to that public school, that they have to follow as well. And for some of these homeschool parents, they saw that as an intrusion, that I guess they felt like that their kid didn't have to follow the same rules. And so our office did our very best to try to explain to them that this is something that, you know, that we have rules for a reason. You know, we can't treat any of these student athletes any differently than we would treat the kids who go to those schools. And it's a matter of fairness. And so there were a lot of homeschool parents who would not support this bill because they thought that it was an overreach on our part as the bill sponsors. But I think that the folks who really truly understand where we're going with this, and then we're just trying to provide an opportunity for these kids to get out, and everything that we've been talking about, that's really the basis. That's all we're trying to accomplish here. It's nothing more, nothing less. And I think a lot of these homeschool parents were reading too much into it, and you know, they were giving our office a hard time, to be quite honest. Some were, and I think they just, in many cases, I think they really misunderstood what our intent is behind this legislation. And what was your second question? I did have a response to that too, Madam Chair.
I had just kind of talked about the relationship of the kids going to school together and bonding and playing on the same team versus someone outsider, quite frankly, coming in and taking someone's spot who attends the school, who tried out and didn't make the team, but then you have an outsider, for all intents and purposes, coming in and playing a sport at the school.
Can I address that question?
Yeah.
I coach high school basketball and have a bunch of athletes. And what's interesting is when your kids do get to the high school level, my daughter Lily, who's a sophomore right now, she plays 2 sports, varsity volleyball and basketball. She goes the majority of the day without seeing most of the girls on those teams at school. At Kent Island High School, the school is big. These girls have all these different classes. Their bonding happens on the court. Their bond and their relationships are built when they play, when they practice. And as somebody who has coached a lot of kids, and you said, Chair, that your kid plays a lot of, your kids play some travel ball. We do a lot of travel ball too. It's really, again, in competition and in practice and in those relationships, you know, on the court, that the kids really build those bonds. I mean, as a coach, a high school coach, I want the best possible kids I can get on my team that live in my county. And I think we are really, especially in Queen Anne's County, we don't have access to a lot of really great students and athletes that would like to participate on our fields and our courts, in our drama productions, because they're homeschooled, but they, would like to contribute in other ways and have access to other things. I think it would be a shame. I think it's completely missing the mark to say, hey, we need the entire homeschool community of the state of Maryland to get on board. We need to know what they want. Well, anybody that knows anything about homeschooling knows that's not how it works. When you're a homeschooling parent, you are doing and pursuing what is best for your individual family and your individual kid. So it'd almost be like sending everybody to a buffet and saying, until everybody agrees to put everything on their plate in a buffet, we're not going to pass something like this. Well, some of us might want to get vegetables and dessert and meat. I mean, we need access to these programs. We still have the umbrella of curriculum guidelines through our individual counties and touch points and things that we have to do. But in my case, my kids have all taken Latin since the 2nd grade, and Latin isn't offered at public high school, and they've really excelled in Latin. And I want to have the opportunity to keep having them taught Latin at the high school level. And that's one of the reasons I would pull my kids out and I would homeschool them, and I homeschool my others, is because I want those curriculum choices. I think we have to really make sure we don't confuse curriculum, guidelines, and oversight with giving kids opportunities to grow in other ways outside of the classroom. And as a coach and a mom, that fear of, will kids gel? Will they be jealous? Look, we had our banquet last night. Kids are jealous of other kids playing time, no matter if they go to science class with them or not. I mean, that's something that completely is, we've experienced as your kids grow up in high school. So I don't think that impacts it at all.
Madam Chair, I think the other issue that you had mentioned too is in some cases, I guess there's a feeling that these homeschool parents are giving up on the public school system, that, if they're giving up on the public school system, they should give up on everything, including extracurriculars. I guess my response to that is not, every child's situation is completely different. And I had to homeschool one of my children because she just did not fit in. That was a very, very last resort for me. Trust me. My wife and I had zero time to homeschool. That is a huge commitment to be able to go through that entire homeschooling process. And we tried to bring some tutors in to help. It was a major stress. I wanted nothing more for her to stay in the public school system. But one size doesn't always fit all. And I think that in those situations where it is a last resort for parents, where they have to pull them out for one reason or another, to have to give up the extracurriculars, I think it's a detriment to those children. I really do.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Bryce. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1122.
Thank you.
Delegate Long, House Bill 1145, whenever you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Delegate Bob Long, hold on for a minute, let me grab my stuff. Here to testify on and present HB 145, the Parent Accountability Act. This bill aims to reduce violence and disruptive behavior in public schools throughout the state of Maryland. This bill, the way it reads is, if a student in a public school engages in 2 or more incidents of violent or disruptive behavior on school premises during school-related activities during a year, the school principal shall provide a written notice to parents or guardians to the student. This notice shall require the parent or guardian and the student to seek counseling. And what this is doing is we want to get the parents involved. And if you look at the fiscal note's wrong. It says there's a fine of $2,000. We changed that last year. And there is a failure. If the failure of the parent doesn't participate, there could possibly be some time or some community hours they would have to be put in. That they have to put in. This bill was put in to stop bullying in the school, the disruptive behaviors in some of our schools. We've had a lot of things happen in our district with not all our schools, but certain schools that we've had kids just go off the hook. Recently we've had kids bringing guns to schools. We had a shooting in Catonsville last month, and we need to get our kids under control, and so the teachers can teach. And what we need to do is get the parents involved. And I think that's one of the problems we're having with some of our children. I thought about this long and hard. We could probably fix a lot of these problems if our parents would just teach their children to have respect for others and respect their self. I know when I was in school, I raised a little heck myself, but nothing to what's going on today. There's no respect. And we want to get things back under control. We just read in Florida that a 5-year-old attacked the teacher, a 5-year-old child attacked the teacher and put her in the hospital. Now, that's just off. I don't know what to say, but anyway, I would ask for a favorable vote, and we need to work together to make sure our kids get a great education, and we need to get the parents involved. I think this will take care of a lot of the problems when we get the parents involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Long? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1145. Thank you, Delegate Long.
Thank you.
Bill 1152, the Vice Chair, and there are about 3 folks after you who will have 2 minutes each. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we're moving right along here. In this committee, we speak a lot about parental rights and rights of our teachers, but House Bill 1152 is legislation necessary to secure the rights of our students in Maryland within the classrooms. There are 2 key portions of the bill: the elimination of suspensions and expulsions for nonviolent offenses committed by students, and the creation of and codification of a comprehensive student bill of rights. The first portion of the legislation will make suspensions and expulsions for nonviolent offenses illegal. The Maryland Commission on School to Prison Pipeline and Restorative Practices, in which this committee created through legislation years ago, found that exclusionary discipline and other zero tolerance practices are ineffective in reducing disruptive behavior, and instead negatively impacts educational outcomes and the overall learning environment for the student. About half of the in-school and 2/3 of the out-of-school suspensions are given to Black students, who make up only 33% of Maryland's public schools. Black students are also arrested at a disproportionately high rates in Maryland schools. The second portion of this bill establishes a student bill of rights in Maryland Code. This is modeled off a policy that was adopted in San Antonio, Texas, as well as similar measures in other areas of this country. The bill states that each Maryland student at a public school has several important rights, including the right to a safe, caring, and welcome school environment, the right to a school in which all students are accepted regardless of their background and differences, the right to a student voice so that the students' ideas and opinions are heard and considered, and the student is given an opportunity for self-expression, the right to consistent and equitable discipline practices. Madam Chair, there is a coalition to reform school discipline practices that has amendments to this bill, in which we should review and accept. And the Office of the Public Defender also has some amendments, and Anne Arundel County also has some amendments of clarifying some of the language that's in the bill as it was written. So with that, Madam Chair, I ask for a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, John Willems, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John Willems, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. I do want to clarify that MABE fully intended to support this bill with amendments. I know there's an all caps opposed at the top of the testimony submitted online, but we do support the bill with amendments. We are concerned with enumerating rights in statute that could give rise to confusion and litigation. And I would point out the right to equal access as opposed to equitable access to school sports could certainly be interpreted to limit the operation of selective participation on teams or specific athletic events. But COMAR already requires that every system adopt guidelines for student responsibilities and rights. And every system under local control has a different approach to enumerating those rights typically in their student handbooks or formally as board policies. So for instance, Prince George's County Board articulates student rights and responsibilities, parent rights and responsibilities, and staff responsibilities very clearly and succinctly in just a couple pages. By contrast, the Howard County Board has a longer document that is broken out by subject area and articulates the students' rights and responsibilities under each of those subject areas. And again, we strongly believe that this ought to be in the purview of each local board. With regard to discipline, and I respect Vice Chair's expertise in this area, would just point out that the adopted code of student conduct, guidelines for student conduct by the state board has a very different set of definitions for disrespect and disruption. They intended to be responded to with in-school responses. So that's very important, I think, to note. But disruption can rise to the level of a suspension. There are 3 tiers of in-school responses. Disrespect is never supposed to rise to the level of an out-of-school exclusion.
Mr. Willems, can you wrap up your testimony, please?
Sure, but disruption certainly can. And so we would urge that any statutory definition of disrespect and disruption match the definitions already adopted by the state board. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Renuka Rage, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Renuka Rege, and I'm an attorney at the Public Justice Center. We advance racial equity in public education by combating the overuse of practices that push students out of school and into the criminal legal system. The PJC supports HB 1152 with amendments. HB 1152 would create a student bill of rights and change the standard for suspensions and expulsions to unsafe behavior. The PJC supports amendments to incorporate the well-established standard for extended suspensions and expulsions that currently exists in the Code of Maryland Regulations. The PJC supports the bill's change to the standard for suspensions of 10 days or less from for cause to unsafe behavior. This change is an important step toward reducing suspensions for minor behaviors that are consistent with typical adolescent development and better addressed through alternative approaches. It's also an important step towards reducing disproportionality of suspensions by race and disability because it will help decrease suspensions for subjective offenses like disrespect, disruption, and insubordination that are susceptible to implicit and explicit biases of school staff. For suspensions longer than 10 days and expulsions, the PJC supports amendments to incorporate the well-established standard for extended suspensions and expulsions that currently exists in COMAR. In 2013, the State Board of Education convened a work group to address this very issue, with input from key stakeholders including MABE, PSAM, MSEA, and the public. Based on the work group's findings, the State Board proposed regulations to keep students in school, reduce long-term suspensions for nonviolent offenses, and end the disproportionate impact of school discipline on minorities and special education students. The board received and reviewed 3,278 public comments from constituents on the regulations. Support for the regulations came from a variety of backgrounds, including parents, teachers, and a range of advocacy organizations. After this extensive public comment process, the board promulgated these regulations in 2014. The PJC supports HB 1152 with amendments to incorporate the standard for extended suspension and expulsions that exists in these carefully established regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Hall for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Delegate Atterbury. My name is Michelle Hall. I am here today representing the Maryland Coalition to Reform School Discipline to lend our support to HB 1152 and offer a friendly amendment to maintain the spirit of the bill. I won't repeat too much of what Delegate Washington and my colleague Renuka said earlier, only that we do believe this bill establishes important rights for students, the most important of which being the consistent and equitable discipline practices. And this bill further effectuates that goal by limiting suspensions for less than 10 days to school situations involving unsafe behaviors. Under current law, principals can suspend students for less than 10 days for cause, which is highly subjective and has no definitions and therefore no guardrails. And so HB 1152 appropriately balances the need for administrators to maintain safety and security in schools while not interrupting children's access to education for typical adolescent behavior. I think Renuka did a great job explaining why we believe we should incorporate the COMAR standard for extended suspensions and expulsions. And so if there are no questions, we just ask you all to adopt a favorable with amendments report for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1152. House Bill 1284, Delegate Rose, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. For the record, Delegate April Rose from District 5 in Carroll County here to present House Bill 1284, income tax credit for cybersecurity measures undertaken by small business for our small business community. This bill will allow a 100% deduction against the state income tax of $1,000 for the initial cyber assessment and cost to implement recommendations of this assessment. In addition, it will allow 100% deduction against the state income tax of $500 for the recurring cybersecurity measures that would include ongoing risk assessments, antivirus software purchases, multi-factor authentication, training, and data encryption. This is an important part because in the process of implementing cybersecurity, it truly is an ongoing process that needs to be monitored. You need to be able to continually update your employees and your software to make sure that you're staying one step ahead of the bad actors out there that are trying to perform these malicious hacks. This will benefit our small business community of less than 50 employees to include a company who technically does not have any employees, but is run solely by the business owner. That's an important piece of this legislation that came up over the interim by one of my constituents who runs a small bed and breakfast and was unfortunately not able to apply for any of the PPP, local grants, or other things that were provided for our business community because of the language within the bills or the processes that's required you to have at least one employee. And sometimes there are businesses that do not. So we wanted to be sure to include them. Ransomware attacks, data breaches, and malware incidents are increasing all the time. When an incident like this occurs, the monetary cost can be crippling to a small business. So the intent of this bill is to provide a 100% credit as an incentive for prevention of these attacks and just to assist with the annual maintenance and training to protect our business community from the damage of these attacks. I will have forthcoming a letter from our Chamber of Commerce. You have written testimony from a local business owner in our community. I've heard from numerous people that feel that this would be very helpful. I appreciate your time and consideration, and I ask for your favorable report and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Delegate Rose? Okay, seeing none, thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1284. House Bill 1326, Delegate Weibel, and there's one witness after you who will have 2 minutes. So whenever you're ready, Delegate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to be with you and the honorable members of Ways and Means Committee. House Bill 1326 creates a state income tax deduction from federal adjusted gross income. The amount of the deduction would be equal to the lesser of the amount in excess of $25,000 that was excluded on the taxpayer's federal return, or $25,000, whichever is less. For example, if a qualifying taxpayer incurred a $40,000 loss on a rental property, this bill would allow an additional state income tax deduction of $15,000. The $25,000 passive activity loss limitation was created by the Tax Reform Act of 1986. The provision limits the amount of passive activity losses, generally from rental real estate, that an individual can claim against their non-passive income, or generally wages. Had it been indexed for inflation, the $25,000 loss limitation would be equivalent to $64,000 in today's dollars. This bill would take the deduction to a maximum of $50,000 for state income tax purposes. The bill specifically excludes from eligibility those individuals who qualify as real estate tax professionals under the IRS code, because these are individuals who generally spend 750 hours or more per year on the rental real estate activity, or more than 50% of their time on the real estate activity. So the bill seeks to help those small mom and pop taxpayers who have sought real estate as an investment and choose to rent that property. In speaking with my local housing authority, they indicate there's a lack of available housing for existing housing vouchers that are already approved. And in the Environment Transportation Committee, it's estimated through testimony that there's a shortage of affordable housing, as many as 80 or 90,000 units. Many of the suitable housing has been removed from the rental market for various reasons, and this bill seeks to assist in a small way, that small investor who remains in the rental industry despite having suffered losses over the past few years. Some of these losses have been attributable to COVID-19 pandemic and for other reasons. I thank you for your time and consideration and ask for a favorable report on House Bill 1326.
Thank you. Bill Costelli for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. Bill Castelli on behalf of the Maryland Realtors. We are in support of the legislation as well. As he indicated, real estate professionals already have a deduction that they use, and about 30% of our members are involved in some kind of property management. Either they may be owners of rental real estate or they may be managing small kind of mom and pop rentals. And that's what this bill provides, is it provides a more generous deduction to those mom and pop rentals. We have taken, again, not a very statistically relevant poll, but certainly a poll amongst many of our members who are doing property management. And it is absolutely true that somewhere between 3 to 20% of these small portfolios are being turned over. Some of it was a reflection of the inability to collect rent during some of the pandemic times, but some of it is just a reflection of the very strong sales market. And so some of these property owners are taking advantage of that to recoup some of their investment. So we do believe that this provides an additional incentive to keep some of these rental property owners in the market, and we would encourage a favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Wyvil. And thank you. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1326. Calling House Bill 1250, Delegate Feldmark and our friends and colleagues from the Economic Matters Committee are joining us. We have Delegate Brooks, Delegate Queens, and Delegate Motz. Welcome. And you have about 4 folks after you that will have 2 minutes each. So whenever you're ready, Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues, and a special welcome and thank you to our colleagues from Economic Matters who are joining us. We don't usually spend a lot of time talking about climate change here in Ways and Means. But this year in particular, we've heard more about it than I recall in past sessions, particularly in relation to solar. And we've heard a few different bills looking at community solar, agrivoltaics. And I think we're seeing a bit of a theme, sort of a common recognition. One, that solar is a critical component of an effective climate solution strategy. 2, we know time is of the essence, right? Both from a public policy standpoint and from a planetary perspective. And we're recognizing that market forces alone are not going to get us where we want to be. And so I think there's a growing concern that our existing incentive structures are not quite getting us where we want to be, especially looking at solar as a relatively new industry compared to the fact that it's competing in a market with fossil fuel industries that have had generations of public subsidization. So from this, from these points, I think we're looking at different angles to try to push us in the right direction. And this bill is another approach with an incentive to try to help push us in the right direction. So it has 2 parts. An investment tax credit and a task force. So first want to talk through the tax credit. This is, as I said, an investment tax credit. So it's an income tax credit based on a percentage of the actual investment made in the solar project. This is sort of a state level version mirroring the federal solar investment tax credit. Now, this bill limits eligible projects only to those that are up to 2 megawatts. And to qualify, the project has to have good labor standards, right? One of our important goals here is not just to meet goals in terms of solar energy production, but really looking at making sure that this industry, as it's growing, is creating good quality jobs. So our friends in Economic Matters are familiar with, there's another bill that they'll be considering, which establishes requirements for labor standards on solar and other renewable energy projects over 2 megawatts. So this bill is really intended to be sort of a supplement and complement to that. With a requirement over 2 megawatts, we're offering a tax credit as an incentive for projects smaller than 2 megawatts. The base credit is 15%, and that's for any project that meets the labor standards. And then we're also recognizing, another issue we've heard a lot about, and I know our friends in Environment and Transportation are dealing with this issue around land use with the siting of solar projects, right? And of course, the cheapest way to build solar is on the ground. A more efficient way to build solar is on rooftops and canopies, but that's more expensive. So in recognition of that, we want to incentivize that good land use of putting solar on land that's already developed. And so the tax credit can be greater for those rooftop or canopy projects with an additional 10%, bringing the total to 25%. The tax credit is not refundable, but it can be carried forward up to 10 years. So the other main component of the bill is a task force. And as I mentioned, we've seen lots of different approaches to try to help incentivize different aspects of solar. But I think we really need to look comprehensively at what our overall goals are, both in terms of solar production, but also how we want to get there with good quality jobs, with equitable access to solar energy, right? With efficient utilization of land and incentivizing smart development. So looking at the variety of goals we have and the variety of incentives that are already in place with grant programs that the state administers, with a variety of tax credits or tax incentives that already exist at the local, state, and federal level, and with our solar energy, our solar renewable energy credits, which are one of the primary financial incentives. We need to look more comprehensively at how these are working together to achieve all of our goals for solar. We're not quite there, but I do believe that with the right perspectives in the conversation, we can take a closer look at this and come up with some good recommendations for incentives that will move us in the right direction. Now, I am working on amendments. You'll see in the testimony, we've got a few favorable with amendments. Most of the amendments deal with the task force itself. One point is we do want to better clarify the areas of recommendations for the task force. And we will be accelerating the time frame. So the plan as drafted was to give this tax credit a couple of years in practice of implementation so that could be evaluated as part of the task force work. But as I said before, time really is of the essence, and we're going to get the task force to work right away so that they can make their recommendations by December of 2023. With that change, I will be shortening the sunset for this tax credit. So currently the bill is drafted, sunsets in 5 years. This tax credit is one of the things that may be a recommendation from the task force, it may not, right? And so we're gonna move that sunset date up to match the recommendations of the task force. If the task force believes the tax credit should continue, they can make that recommendation, and then we'll have time to extend it in code in 2024. And finally, we will be making some changes to the membership of the task force, looking at representation from an electric company, from counties, the Climate Access Fund, really trying to round that out as comprehensively as we can. So we've got a few folks here to testify for you. I am happy to answer any questions and ask for your favorable report.
Thank you. Next, Jeffrey Guido for 2 minutes, please. Perhaps he is not here with us. Okay. Donna Edwards for 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of both committees. Very good to see you this afternoon. You have our written testimony. I just want to add a few things. The Maryland taxpayer is an investor in businesses all across Maryland. This committee's heard me say that before. Our business tax credits reflect our values. So should we continue to give money away without demanding certain criteria is met? House Bill 1250 starts with the premise that our investors, the taxpayers, who are predominantly the workers of Maryland, receive a return on their investment. And it also builds the solar investment tax credit with good labor standards from the beginning. The task force brings together an array of stakeholders. It includes the business, labor, government, and environmental activists. So this bill, House Bill 1250, really sets us on the right path to study what works and what does not when it comes to expanding solar energy creation in Maryland. And it also ensures that solar development in the state will continue to create good quality, family-sustaining jobs. This bill gives us the opportunity to make sure solar energy policies benefit all of Maryland's economy and not just the solar companies' profits. We urge a very favorable report on HB 1250. Thank you.
Thank you. Kristen Harverson, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committees. For the record, my name is Kristen Harbison. I'm the political director for the Maryland League of Conservation Voters. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you on this afternoon on HB 1250. We are pleased to lend our support to this important bill and thank Delegate Feldmark for her leadership on this issue. In order to confront the growing threat of climate change, Maryland must continue to take bold steps to support and incentivize the investment and expansion of our solar energy portfolio, especially smaller projects that can be built on rooftops, parking lots, brownfields. This committee has several opportunities, as have been mentioned, to advance these projects this year, including HB 76, which is a top priority for Maryland LCD, and HB 1039, which was heard last week. Both of which specifically seek to provide support for community solar programs. All of these bills work in concert to support the expansion of smaller solar projects, which are important for our state efforts to confront our climate crisis and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. In addition to supporting solar energy development, though, and the jobs they create, we need to ensure that these jobs are good quality, family-sustaining jobs. This bill seeks to create incentives to encourage developers in these smaller solar projects to meet these goals as well. Finally, we support the task force that this bill would create to identify the other opportunities to incentivize quality family-sustaining jobs within the solar industry. We encourage the committee to consider other opportunities to ensure that low and moderate income or LMI communities, as well as those in overburdened communities, are addressed in this task force. To this end, we urge the inclusion of at least one member of this task force that works specifically with solar development serving LMI communities, and we're grateful to the sponsor for including the Climate Access Fund to serve this role. Maryland LCD strongly urges a favorable report on this important bill, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today.
Thank you. Brianna January for 2 minutes, please.
Madam Chair, thank you for having me again. Please do disregard the special guest over my shoulder, joys of working from home. Brianna January with the Maryland Association of Counties in support of HB 1250 with a few friendly amendments. To be short, committee, counties should have representation on the task force to fully cover the diversity of Maryland's various environments and landscapes. And as such, MACO does propose that the task force allocate 2 seats from each of our 4 regions to reflect the breadth of implementation diversity. Additionally, we ask that the task force should be expanded to study all aspects of broader solar rollout to include capacity, land renewal incentives, clean energy sourced on landfill properties, and the like. And we're happy to hear that it sounds like the bill sponsor seems to be looking at both of those recommendations from us. So on that, we look forward to working with the committee on these amendments and on the task force should this bill pass amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Guido, please. I see that you are in. There is a Jeff and a Lori Guido, so did either one of you, I'm not sure if you're having technical difficulties.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Guido with the Baltimore DC Metro Building Trades Council. We're in support of House Bill 1250. As Maryland is moving towards more renewable energy, I feel it's important to have labor standards attached to those projects. As tax incentives are public dollars, they should benefit the public working men and women of Maryland, and creating a pathway for citizens in underserved communities to create their pathway to middle-class careers. And we ask the committee for a favorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Brooks has a question.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This question is for the sponsor, and I want to thank her for the bill. I think this probably is going to fill that void that perhaps will be created by the federal government when they finally phase out the federal investment tax credit. Madam Sponsor, I see in the bill you said for 2 megawatts of power. Now is this for generators, or is this for homeowners? Because I know the average home probably uses about 11,000 kilowatts a year, and you're saying 2 megawatts. Now 1 megawatt can power about 1,000 homes for a month. So that's a lot of power. So if you could perhaps explain that one to me. Yes.
So this is primarily focused not on individual residential installations, but on community solar, some of the smaller projects that we see in a variety of sources. So not utility scale, but larger than an individual homeowner. Now, I do believe individual residential installations would be eligible, but that's really sort of a smaller piece of what we're focused on is the sort of community solar projects, other solar projects that are, not utility scale, but are producing for off-takers.
Right. Okay. And one follow-up question. Now, if this is available for residential, much smaller scale, now would that be on the federal side? What they would do that investment tax credit would go to the owner of the panels, as opposed. I know there were some companies that would come in and put solar panels on your rooftop, but the investment tax credit went to them, so there wasn't really any real say benefit. Well, the maximum benefit was not extended to the residents. But would this bill have the same component?
So it would. So the tax credit would accrue to the owner of the panels, right? Whoever's doing the installation. Now, I do think there's been a change, in that a change in model, or at least an expansion of the models available to homeowners getting solar, that some are still that model where the installer owns the panels. Some homeowners are pursuing a model where they're actually purchasing and owning the panels that are installed on their own home. In either case, the value of the tax credit could and should be extended to the homeowner, whether that's through receiving the tax credit or through receiving a better price because the installer is receiving the tax credit, right? So it should be passed along.
Okay, and lastly, one final question, Madam Chair. The state of Maryland, they sort of piggyback along with the federal investment tax credit. the state of Maryland would give you $1,000 grant toward the installation of solar panels. Would this particular bill allow those individuals to qualify for that as well?
I do not think this would prohibit anyone from taking advantage of other tax credits that are also available.
Okay, I think it's a great bill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Welcome. I'm impressed with your knowledge of, power and all that, but you are on ECM, so.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1250. Thank you. Is Delegate Hornberger with us, or he's in another committee, perhaps? So we will skip that bill and go to Delegate Chi, who I see is here. And there are 6 witnesses after Delegate Chi who will have 2 minutes each. So Delegate Chi, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Delegate Lily Chi here to present HB 1384. HB 1384 establishes the Industry 4.0 Matching Grant Program to help small and medium-sized manufacturers adopt the new technologies to stay competitive, because keeping up with the technological changes is a critical barrier to many manufacturing businesses in Maryland. This committee is aware of the statewide work group created last year by the Maryland General Assembly to modernize and grow Maryland manufacturing. After about 6 months of work, including studying other states' good practices and policies, this group recommends creating a state matching grant program for Maryland's SME manufacturers to help them de-risk the adoption of technologies. This program is modeled after several other states with similar programs, such as Massachusetts, Iowa, Connecticut, and Indiana. Maryland manufacturing is diverse, and we have great companies here creating good middle-class jobs and economic opportunities. But we are punching below our weight because we have not, as a state, focused much on growing this sector. Economic development is very much a public sector responsibility, and being strategic and intentional can make all the difference, because economic development is just too important to be left to economic developers. With the global supply chain challenges, many states and the whole nation are now focusing on beefing up domestic productions. The Biden administration also has ambitious goals of Buy America and Make It in America. It's all the more important that we facilitate and enable the growth of our own manufacturing capacities and enable our local programs so we can be more ready to receive federal assistance and be part of the domestic supply chains. This program will be housed in Commerce, which should establish a governance committee to evaluate the grant applications and work in collaboration with the Office of Small Minority Women Business Affairs to ensure the participation of MBEs, minority business enterprises. We have a couple of amendments to make the bill more modest in our asking. The original bill as drafted is asking for $5 million a year for 3 years. We decided we can start with the $2 million to see which companies are ready to participate in the matching program and see how the programs work, and look at the Commerce report before we decide how much more we should invest in the program. And with that, I will turn to my witnesses. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kenneth Sanchez for 2 minutes, please.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. My name is Ken Sanchez, and I'm the president and CEO of Chesapeake Specialty Products in Sparrows Point. Thank you all for considering supporting this bill 1384. It's really going to help manufacturers here in Maryland. Our local company exports foundry sand additives and steel abrasives all over the world to automotive, industrial, and agriculture companies. As you all know, manufacturing provides great jobs and grows the middle class, but manufacturing also supports many other industries like transportation. Obviously, you guys know how important the port is. Also, it supports banking, insurance, consultants, and many other local service providers. Recently, a lot of US manufacturing has moved overseas or out of state. These other states and countries are incenting manufacturers to move out of Maryland. My company has been quartered by states like Michigan, Indiana, Texas, and Ohio. This bill is going to help Maryland stay competitive so that we can keep good jobs here in the state. Industry 4.0 is important. It allows Maryland manufacturers to compete with anyone in the world. The problem is it's complicated, it's expensive, and it's hard for small manufacturers to implement. For example, like a small sensor to monitor the output of a machine might only cost a few $100s, but you need hundreds of them. And these sensors have to talk to advanced computer systems that run this machinery. And then these computers have to talk using advanced network connections run throughout the facility. And then there's the software, the complexity it's just mind-boggling. So this bill is going to help to take some of the strain off the smaller manufacturers so that we can embrace this technology and keep, or better yet, even expand clean, high-tech manufacturing in Maryland. So please help us vote by voting to pass this really important bill. Thank you.
Jack Weber, please, for 2 minutes.
Yes, this is Jack Weber. I'm the CEO and president of Uptown Press, and I've been engaged in the printing industry for over 40 years at this point. And our industry over the years have changed quite dramatically. Previously, printing was done on older machines that you set up, took a long time to do it, and these machines also last a long time. However, in our current manufacturing processes now, we use almost completely digital devices and digital output devices that take complex digital data and then re-images it so it can go out onto a piece of paper. So this entire change in our industry has required us to retool in lots of different areas. By the passage of the HB 1384, it's to give my business an opportunity to make some significant steps forward in many important areas. First, I'll be able to buy additional advanced manufacturing equipment, which will increase my efficiency and productivity, give me a greater marketing reach to expand to new geographic marketplaces, including globally. Since my industry is changing very rapidly, and competitive is always a constant challenge, is to maintain competitive edge. Using this emerging technology will undoubtedly affect our printing and manufacturing both today and in the future. Greater interconnectivity, automation, artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, machine learning, and real-time data collection are all part of what it is that we do today. That was markedly different than what we had previously done just 20, 30 years ago. Also, there's a chance of, by acquiring additional advanced manufacturing capability, enables me to monitor production, quality, and produce high quality products at rapid speeds. Thus, I'm able to be more competitive, give my business that additional momentum needed to move forward for the years to come. And then lastly, in addition to it will also enable us to hire highly skilled workers, additional off-site personnel, and increase wages within our organization, which both benefits job creation in the state of Maryland and in Baltimore City, in which our facilities reside. I also print a lot of election data information as well, should anyone need any data or ballots printed for this election coming up. Thought I'd throw that in.
Thank you. Mike Galazio, please, for 2 minutes. Oh, you're on mute, sir.
I apologize.
No problem.
And I'm testifying about new technology. Oh, shame on me. All right. As president of the Regional Manufacturing Institute of Maryland, and we've been around for 32 years, serving manufacturers across the state, I'm here today to testify in support of House Bill 1384 with the amendments offered by Delegate Chi. The benefits of a fund for manufacturers to adopt new technologies will have many, many positive impacts, and you've heard some of them already. But I want to highlight a few that I'd like to talk about. First, Maryland manufacturing supply chain will be supercharged by technologies that connect companies in new ways to improve the industry's capacity to respond more quickly and effectively. You know, we learned from COVID that we need to strengthen Maryland's manufacturing supply chain. Small and medium-sized companies are part of the national defense industry supply chain. Given current global affairs, we must ensure that companies have the latest and best technologies. HB 1384 will arm Maryland manufacturing with the technologies to win. As broadband reaches all areas of the state, manufacturers currently without broadband access will be able to adopt these new technologies that require high-speed internet connections. And therefore, particularly in the rural areas, they will be much more productive. Worker skills will become more technologically sophisticated as we increase the career opportunities and the opportunities for higher wages. Another way this bill is going to help is that Maryland manufacturers can better compete for contracts for the offshore wind industry. You know, right now we're competing with companies worldwide on these contracts for the offshore wind. With the adoption of this bill, Maryland companies, especially minority-owned manufacturers, will be better positioned to compete globally with the passage of this bill. And finally, every sector of manufacturing and every part of the state will win with the passage of this bill. It will enhance worker skills, it will create new types of jobs, and create value for initiatives like wind energy, broadband, and the supply chain capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christine Crone, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury, and good afternoon, members of the Ways and Means Committee. It's Christine Crone, and I represent the Maryland Tech Council, which is a collaborative community that is actively engaged in building stronger life science and technology companies. I'd like to thank Delegate Chi for sponsoring the bill and for her leadership in the work group to study the transformation of manufacturing in Maryland's emerging digital economy. As a member of that work group, Maryland Tech Council supports House Bill 1384. The bill will significantly benefit small and medium-sized manufacturers by establishing a dollar-for-dollar matching grant program within the Department of Commerce that will assist those manufacturers with implementing Industry 4.0 technologies. Manufacturers are looking to smart technology to make processes faster, more automated, and more competitive. Maryland is a national leader in innovative industries, and we possess all the right resources for advanced manufacturing, distribution, and logistics. For Maryland manufacturers to grow at a meaningful rate, we need to help them adopt technologies and allow them to grow faster. A favorable report is requested.
Thank you. Next, Michael Keller, please, for 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, Delegate Chi, and members of the committee. Thank you for providing me the opportunity to join you all today, and special thanks to Delegate Chi for her commitment to the future of manufacturing sector by putting forward this bill. My name is Michael Keller. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is a nonprofit committed to supporting the manufacturing sector in Maryland. And I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 1384, specifically for the creation of the Industry 4.0 Technology Grant Program. Annually, we work with nearly 4,000 manufacturers throughout the state that are proud to call Maryland home. And almost across the board, these manufacturers continually raise the challenge of investing in new equipment, new technologies, and capital improvements to enable them to compete in the global environment. These new technologies, the Industry 4.0 technologies, things like sensors, robotics, automation tools, are critical for Maryland manufacturers to be able to compete efficiently and effectively to produce the high quality goods that are made here in Maryland. Specifically for the small and the mid-sized manufacturers, having the financial support to assist in the purchase of these technologies will help reduce the risk and accelerate the return on investment that these technologies will enable them to compete into the future. Currently, there are a number of states around the country that have established similar matching grant programs focused on investing in new technologies, and it provides these states with a significant competitive advantage over the Maryland landscape. States like Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Illinois have well-established grant programs that today provide their manufacturers with up to $200,000 each to support the investment of new technologies and equipment. And the support that these states are showing their manufacturers throughout their states are enabling them to expand their base much more rapidly than we are here in Maryland. House Bill 1384, if passed, will help level this playing field, and it will provide incentives to encourage Maryland manufacturers to reinvest in their businesses, reducing the risk for the purchase of new equipment, and help establish Maryland as the leading state throughout the Mid-Atlantic for advanced manufacturing. We know that the Industry 4.0 technology grant will have an immediate and positive impact on the manufacturing community, and it will spark long-term economic growth and job growth throughout the sector. And for these reasons, we request a favorable report on House Bill 1384. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next, Adam Porter for 2 minutes, please.
So thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Adam Porter, and I'm here to express my full support for this proposed legislation and to highlight why this legislation is so important to struggling Maryland manufacturers. So for more than 30 years, I've been a professor of computer science at the University of Maryland, and I also serve as the executive director of the Fraunhofer USA Center Mid-Atlantic, a U.S. not-for-profit corporation whose mission is to turn basic research into processes, methods, and tools to make companies more competitive. Now, over the last decades, as you've heard, industry after industry has been completely reshaped by information technology, and this inescapable trend is now hitting manufacturing. Now, we can't predict exactly how manufacturing will change, but we can be sure that it'll be intimately dependent on advanced IT technologies. Put simply, those who master these technologies will thrive, and those who don't are going to fail. So in my work with manufacturing companies, I see every day that they struggle with the costs, the time and the risks associated with adopting advanced manufacturing. As you heard already, buying a smart machine isn't enough. It has to be the right machine with the right data that can actually talk to all the other machines, data, people, and processes that make up an entire business. Now, this bill will provide matching funds to help manufacturers tackle all of these problems. And it could also be unique in helping companies acquire the software expertise that's needed when they have to adapt their legacy machinery to new platforms, to deploy reliable and robust software systems, and to scale up data collection and analysis. In short, this bill is a substantial and intelligent investment in the economic competitiveness of Maryland manufacturers, and it follows the lead of our competitor states who, as you heard already have enacted similar programs. Maryland must enact this bill just to stay even with the competition. So in closing, I want to thank you for your attention, and I urge you to vote yes on this legislation. And of course, if any lawmakers or their aides have additional questions, I'd be happy to make myself available to address them at that time. Thank you so much.
Question, Delegate Palakovich-Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's for Delegate Chi. Thank you so much for bringing this bill forward. I just wanted to get a little bit more clarification. In the bill, it says that the types of eligible manufacturers would be a small or medium-sized enterprise manufacturer. And maybe I missed something, but is there anything else in the bill that defines, about the size of those companies? We often see with other economic development programs that there's usually a limit placed in terms of the number of employees or the age of the company or gross sales or something like that. Is there anything in the bill that points to one of those areas?
Thank you for the question. We actually did not want to be too prescriptive on that because every industry sector is different and it's a fast changing landscape, but we do task the Department of Commerce in collaboration with the Small Minority Business Office to figure out what makes sense. I know there's federal standard, but also, we should make it applicable to what Maryland business landscape is. And when it comes to the manufacturing sector, so that makes sense so that our businesses can actually meaningfully participate. And so that we don't allow one or two companies to just suck out the whole amount of money, for example, so Commerce is charged with developing that protocol and the regs.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, thank you, Delegate Chi. That concludes the testimony on House Bill 1384.
Thank you.
Calling our final bill of the day, Delegate Hornberger, House Bill 1273, and there were 4 witnesses after you who will have 2 minutes each. So whenever you're ready, Delegate.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee. For the record, Delegate Hornberger here on HB 1273. This is a bill that has a big impact not only in Cecil County, but statewide. And what this bill seeks to do is to encourage travel and tourism within our state. It does so by creating a $500 for individual and $1,000 for jointly filed of a qualified travel within the state to receive a tax break and as a refundable means. This bill has been brought before this committee before, and we weren't able to get to it last year, but it is a fantastic bill because it incentivizes anyone who lives here to be able to collect this amount of money. It does have a sunset date, and you also have to do a bit of documentation. And this is a refundable tax credit, which is to say that you have to outlay the money first and then prove that you actually spent it and then apply. So we think it's a good bill. It's got a lot of advocates that are going to be speaking on behalf of it today, and no opposition. So with that, I'd love to take any questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
First, Deborah Carter, please, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Delegates Hornberger, Anderton, Bottler, Buckle, and Griffiths for supporting this bill. A few years ago, I attended a funeral for a longtime family friend. I'd known him all my life, and he was one of those larger-than-life people. He's a retired Maryland DNR sergeant and then became a bailiff for the Kent County District Court. During his service, it was mentioned that he really didn't like leaving the Eastern Shore, which I can understand, but it was also mentioned that he never left the state of Maryland. He never traveled. When I heard of this bill, we started working on this bill with the Maryland Tourism Coalition. I looked up the statistics, and the most recent are that 11% of Americans have never left their home state. They want to travel within their own states, but they feel they aren't prepared, or they don't have the money, and they don't know exactly how to do that. House Bill 1273 is a good for business bill. It will generate income for Maryland's many travel, hospitality, and entertainment-related businesses, both large and small. It will motivate our residents to get outside and maybe be what will inspire some of our residents to take that all-important first step out their door to create their own cherished memories, to be rejuvenated and renewed in our amazing state. With so many struggling tourism-related businesses, this tax credit would be a win-win for both Maryland's economy and our residents. We ask for your support for House Bill 1273. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Hillary Pennington, please, for 2 minutes.
Hi, thank you so much for taking your time. My name is Hillary Pennington. I'm the Director of Hospitality and Operations at Stratosphere Social in Eldersburg, Maryland. We're a tourist destination, a family entertainment center. We have things like axe throwing and bowling and arcade and a full bar and restaurant in Maryland's only indoor backyard. But our story kind of started out a little tragic. We were supposed to open to the public on March 16th of 2020, which if you don't have that date ingrained in your head, as well as I do in mine, that's the day that they shut restaurants down in the state of Maryland. Where we thought we would take a 2-week hiatus, we ended up taking 4 months when we were already over budget and over budget and behind schedule. So the fact that I'm sitting here today, I'm very thankful that we're still alive and kicking. We've made it through the biggest part of COVID, but now we have the new things, challenges such as staffing, labor increases, inflation. I just got nervous all of a sudden, I don't know why. And so this bill specifically encouraging people within the state of Maryland to travel within the state of Maryland would do a huge service, not only to companies such as mine that are continuing to still try and dig our way out of the COVID hole, but also just to our beautiful state and encouraging people to travel and be tourists within our own state. So I ask you to support House Bill 1273 on behalf of Maryland Tourism Coalition and Stratosphere Social, and thank you for your time.
Hold on 1 second. Thank you. Next, Georgiana Windley, please, for 2 minutes. Georgiana?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Atterbury and members of the committee. Gigi Winley with the Kent Narrows Development Foundation here in support of this bill. And here's why. The tax credit does several things to support businesses and communities throughout all of Maryland. First, it's going to encourage people to travel again. Second, it prevents business failures, which in turn reduces the number of vacant facilities in your communities. And you know, with all of the demand drivers being disrupted, this can cause a lot of business failures, and business failures do cause vacant buildings, and that can just spiral into a downward situation for many communities. And something you may not have thought about, it will spark educational travel. Just yesterday, I'd like to mention that the International Trade Division of the U.S. Department of Commerce released a new report, the 2020 Travel and Tourism Industry Impact on the U.S. Economy. And here are some of the highlights. Domestic travel demand by resident households declined by 53% from 2019 to 2020. At the same time, domestic business travel demand declined by 40.9%. That is devastating. Domestic travel demand declined by 33.6%. And travel demand by non-residents, that's the international visitors to the US, declined by 82.9%. And those overseas visitors usually spend more than any other visitors into our economy. And that accounts for 1/5 of all the overall travel decline, or 20.7% of travel demand from 2019 to 2020. So the sectors hit hardest include passenger air travel and transportation services, food services and restaurants, traveler accommodations, and tourism-related shopping. It's worth mentioning, too, that the Maryland Department of Commerce shows a similar downward trend that is reflected with the travel and tourism generated sales tax, down 31% for FY 2021. In some, the recovery is going to...
Ms. Winley, can you wrap up your testimony, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
In summary, your efforts to support hospitality-related entities will help to stabilize communities during this uneven recovery period. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Mays for 2 minutes, please.
Hello, good afternoon, Chair Atterbury and members of the committee. My name is Melissa Mays, and I'm here today on behalf of the Boston Platt Law Firm and our client, the Maryland Tourism Coalition. And I'm here today to encourage a favorable report on HB 1273. A version of this bill was submitted last session. However, the current version has a major difference. The fiscal note has been reduced from $30 million to just $3 million. Yet, those $3 million Maryland dollars spent on Maryland hotels, bed and breakfast, local shops, restaurants, vineyards, distilleries, local tours, concert venues, and countless other travelers' leisurely activities can be the difference between Maryland businesses emerging from these last 2 years or not. This tax credit will encourage Marylanders to travel and spend money in Maryland instead of going to our neighboring states or even out of the country. Just a few $1,000s of that $3 million to a local business can make and will make the difference to that business owner, your constituent. Further, this bill contains a sunset provision that will set in 2024. This means the tax credit is more of a 2-year pilot program than a long-term commitment. And it could not come at a better time now that people are becoming more comfortable with traveling as we emerge from the pandemic, but are now heavily discouraged due to the sharp rise in gas prices. And of course, everyone thinks of traveling to Ocean City in the summer because who doesn't love the beach? And Ocean City is packed with great family attractions. But Marylanders truly have pride in Maryland, and we know there's so much more our state has to offer. This tax credit will help encourage people to visit farms and orchards in the fall to go apple and pumpkin picking. And personally, I would love to visit Deep Creek in the winter to enjoy the peace of the snow-covered mountains and the quaint towns of Western Maryland, or go to a live concert at one of our many prominent venues. In summary, this tax credit would be a big win for the average Marylander like myself, as well as a win for the Maryland businesses in your district. For these reasons, we respectfully urge a favorable report on HB 1273. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Delegate Hornberger or any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the testimony on House Bill 1273, and that concludes the hearings for the Ways and Means Committee today. Thank you, committee. Just hold on one second while we come off the live stream and have a couple of committee announcements here. Thank you to our witnesses. You